Hey, gang, this is Brian. You know, one of the things that we're working on with our show is trying to get more time so that we can give you more great content. Our interview with Vic James had to be cut down to fit inside the 1 hour we're allotted on our show. So here is the full interview with author Vic James. Enjoy. This is Brian Held with the Week in Geek radio show on News Talk 99.5 WRNO. And I'm joined by a very special guest today. I have author Vic James on the line. How are you?
Hi, hello there from a cold and autumnal London.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we're still pretty hot over here, so I'm kind of jealous.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've got my hot water bottle and I'm ready to chat.
Wonderful. So you are the author of the Dark Gifts series. Your third book, Bright Ruin, is out on October 9th of 2018. We got an advance copy, but I wanted to mention that we talked to you about your first book, Gilded Cage, all the way back February 9th of 2017, and then your second book, Tarnished City, on February 4th of 2018. So can you kind of catch me up, like where are we at right now in this book series?
Yes, of course. So it's set in an alternate contemporary Britain, which is ruled by magic-using aristocrats. In every other respect, it looks pretty much like the UK today, with the exception that everyone who doesn't have magic and isn't an aristocrat has to spend 10 years of their life sort of in service to the state. You're sent to a sort of a grim work town where you'll be sort of laboring away. And if that sounds pretty far-fetched, well, you know, just ask yourself if you've paid off your mortgage yet, or if you've paid off your student debt, and in fact, are you right now sort of doing your labor for the state? So that's the situation in Britain when book one opens. Change is afoot. There are many people who believe that this is not right, this is not fair. But of course, what I wanted to explore is when you have a 1% whose ability, whose power, because these folks, they don't just have magic, of course, they also have political power. They also have superb wealth and status and luxury. So they control every form of power. So, of course, getting rid of them or changing the system is not going to be easy. And really in book two, you know, my idealistic characters kind of come to that realization. It's a kind of, oh, heck, you know, how are we going to do this? And it was really interesting for me seeing reader response to book two and people sort of saying, wow, you know, I'm kind of anxious now. How are they going to pull off the revolution? And obviously I've sort of been sitting at home kind of rubbing my hands with glee and going, ha, 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 because of course, you know, history tells us not every revolution succeeds.
Right.
So that's really what book three is about. Does it succeed? If not, why not? Or if so, how so?
Well, and your book series focuses on a commoner family, the Hadley family, who are entering their years of servitude at the very beginning. And when we start book three, man, they're really scattered to the wind. You are just putting the screws to this poor family. You know, tell me about their plight.
Yes. I mean, you know, the one thing that I sort of never wanted to do is just sort of make life hard for my characters for no reason. I mean, I remember at one Comic-Con, I met the wonderful Robin Hobb, a fantasy writer I admire so much. And you know, she's a sort of big believer in this thing that character suffering should never be gratuitous, and it has to arise from the choices that characters have made. And that was always sort of super important for me with this family in particular, because we follow kind of the three children of the family. This isn't a kid's book, but this group of characters are teenagers. There's sort of Abby, who's 18, Luke, who is sort of 16, 17, and their little sister Daisy, who's 10. And at the beginning of book one, it's not a spoiler to say this, the whole family is split up. And then the choices that each of those three make put them in sort of ever more kind of polarized situations. And some of them, Luke, in a way, the boy in the middle, has remained quite consistent throughout. He'd just discovered sort of aspects of himself that he didn't know were there, but which the challenges that he's gone through have kind of brought out in him. So in Luke's case, it's a question of sort of self-discovery, like an inner strength that he'd never had to use before. The case of his elder sister, Abby, it was the one that I sort of found most interesting. And I sort of took a little bit of a risk in book one by making her, she's very bright, but she's quite sort of sucked into the celebrity and the glamour of this elite. And it's only her experiences in book one that sort of strip away some of her sort of delusions about what these people are like and what they can do. So for her, it's a case of really radically sort of overhauling. She has the most sort of dramatic kind of arc of self-growth, if you like. She has to face up to the fact that everything she thought is wrong. And then we have Daisy, who's sort of age 10, and I really wanted the challenge of writing someone who, is a child, has a childlike take on the world, and yet actually those qualities can kind of just sort of cut through. They can cut through the politics. They can cut through, sort of adult preconceptions. They can cut through the things that a lot of us do, which is just to overthink. So Daisy, the youngest one, is she's very intuitive. She sees things in characters. One character who surprises a lot of people at the end of book two. Daisy had that person pegged from the beginning. So I really sort of wanted to play with, kind of different types of character growth, because to me that was sort of super realistic, very important to reflect that. Sometimes it takes us a while to unlearn our own prejudices, our own preconceptions, or to realize just how kind of partial our view of the world is. And to see characters sort of engaging in that process of trying to understand as their worldview widens out.
Right. And I think it's amazing that we get to see little Daisy as this steadfast rock that the family kind of comes back to and gets just a refocusing on things. So let me ask you a question, because I was stalking you a bit on your social media, and you... You went to a suffragette experience, which you said that you used to help you inform the writing of Bright Ruin about the protest and resistance aspect of humanity. Tell me about incorporating that into the book.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge thing for me. I did history at university, and the books are kind of layered through with history. As Cillian says in book one, if you don't know history, then you're doomed to repeat it. But if you do know history, then you have the power to change it. So earlier this year, we celebrated 100 years of women's suffrage in the UK. It wasn't a perfect form of suffrage. It was still, property owning women, but it was a massive step forward, and it didn't come easily. Women quite literally put their lives on the line. They would be arrested. They were force fed. And the women that history has called suffragettes, they were the most radical, the most militant, and they did embrace the use of violence. They embraced the destruction of property, in its mildest form. They would go around sort of smashing windows in the centre of London. They also put their own lives and arguably that of others in danger. And it was really powerful for me as a woman who, for 100 years I've enjoyed this privilege of the vote thanks to the risks that those women took. And looking back, you sort of think, well, if they hadn't pushed that hard, if they hadn't been that ruthless, would change have happened? Would it have come so soon? And I think that's a really big question that everybody really needs to ask themselves. I mean, we live in a politically very sort of active moment. It's an inflammatory moment, in the UK with Brexit, and obviously in the US, sort of like every day there's a new political headline, and there are people on the street saying we're not happy with this or that. And I think we're at a moment in time when everybody is sort of asking themselves, how much do I believe in this? How badly do I want this change to happen? Or, how strongly do I believe that this government is mine and represents me? And that's sort of what I want. That's a question people have asked themselves through the ages. So for me, going to that sort of suffragette experience, it was participatory. So we all had to kind of put stones in our pockets and sort of go out into Trafalgar Square, which is exactly where the suffragettes were smashing shop windows. And then we got arrested. I'm making little air quotes here. And then we got taken down into a basement and we were interrogated, more air quotes. And I was surprised at how angry I got with this poor actor who had been given the job of interrogating me. I was shouting at him and I was really kind of in the moment. And I thought, you know what, 100 years ago, I would have been a suffragette. And I think that's learning that about yourself, how far you're prepared to go for your beliefs, was hugely valuable for me as a person and definitely hugely valuable for me as a writer when I was working on Bright Ruin.
Well, and definitely the whole theme of protest and resistance resonates all throughout Bright Ruin. It's incredible how you wove that into the narrative. Now, if I could shift gears a little bit, when I read, I mentioned this to you earlier, when I read books nowadays, I read it in the fashion of, can this be some sort of streaming series or not? And apparently there are TV rights being talked about on your Dark Gifts series. Can you dig into that a little?
Yes, yeah. I mean, they have been sold and they're being worked on they've been sold to one of the big studios. I sadly can't say which. I'm just all bursting to shout about this. But yes, it's been bought by one of the studios specifically for streaming television, and they have placed it with a production company that has a kind of an amazing track record. I mean, I'm just sort of insanely excited about this. And it's interesting that you say that, because obviously my background is in television, and I do get a lot of people have come to me and have said, wow, when I was reading this, I was seeing it. And then they sort of say, is that because you work in telly? And I'm like, well, no, I make I make sort of 60-minute documentaries. I don't make that sort of television, but I'm a really passionate consumer of it. I love, who doesn't love a good sort of Netflix or Amazon kind of box set binge. And yes, I mean, for me, obviously some of that has sort of translated into the way I write. I mean, certainly I see it. I'm quite a visual writer, and obviously for these books, they've been written, they're all set in the UK, so they're all set in places that I know very well, that they have a real world analog, so Crovan's Castle, it is an actual castle in Scotland.
Oh,
Somebody
wow.
Somebody tweeted me on Twitter the other day, and they were like, is it this castle? And I was like, yes. And they said, right, I'm going to go there. And then she sent me all of the photographs, and I was like, oh my God, somebody had actually gone to Crovan's Castle. Why would anybody want to do that? But it is a very beautiful castle. It's a very beautiful castle. And the scenes in London in book 3, again, these are streets that I walk through every day. So maybe that's also part of it. Maybe the fact that I know so intimately what I'm writing about sort of creates that sense of place. That's certainly what I was hoping for.
Right. Man, how surreal is that? Like, Crovan's Castle is pretty rough in the book, and to go actually visit it and see this beautiful visage, and then like imagine how it looks in the book,
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic example of sort of beautiful on the outside and kind of rotten to the core. And but I mean, the places that get sort of blown up, burned down, et cetera, in book 3, I had a lot of fun destroying. Obviously, there's a kind of a sequence towards the end when we do see violent protest, and then we see the response to that from our magical elite. And suffice to say that quite a lot of London gets trashed, and there was a fairly sort of evil thrill in doing
Yeah.
in doing some of my favorite and most beautiful buildings. There's nothing personal in this, but places I love do quite literally go up in flames.
Well, and shifting gears once again, this may be a little belated, but your book, your first book in the series, Gilded Cage, was the 2018 World Book Night title. What is World Book Night? I hadn't heard anything about this.
Well, I mean, World Book Night, it is a global initiative. It does happen over there in the US. It happens in many countries around the world, but each country sort of makes its own selection. So this was a sort of a UK choice, and a short list of books, maybe around about a dozen, that span a whole sort of range of, it's fiction, non-fiction, it's sort of literary fiction. I'm doing my air quotes again there. Right. Genre fiction, crime. And the goal of it is really just to get people passionate about reading. So people who, maybe have homes where there aren't a lot of books, maybe local libraries are closing down because of, sort of government funding decisions, or maybe there just isn't one nearby. Maybe the school library is not particularly well stocked anymore. So it's really designed, and they also go into things like, sort of residential homes, they go into prisons. So what happens is 12 books that the committee sort of believes are kind of exciting books, accessible books that would help kind of hook people into reading. Those books are selected. The publishers, by way of, sort of charitable activity, donate copies of those books, and then they are given out by the public, given out by volunteers on that day. So sometimes it's done through schools. Sometimes, people will just sort of hand them out on the street or sort of hide them in places. And it's just this sort of beautiful day that is just designed to help books reach further to folks for whom, it's not a part of their everyday life. So that's something that I've seen happen for a number of years. And, no kidding, I was bowled over when they picked Gilded Cage. I cannot believe this. This is a dream, when they that sort of living the dream thing.
Right.
It's I have to say, it's kind of amazing. It's, sort of selling screen rights, World Book Day. It's just, I feel like I'm extremely fortunate, and it's to do with, how fantastic my publishers are as well. Del Rey Books in the US and Pam Macmillan in the UK. They help get these books out there to people, but absolutely no kidding. It's rocked my world. World Book Night was amazing. Such an honor, such a privilege.
Definitely fantastic, and you're right. Del Rey is such a pleasure to work with. We love working with them, and I'm kind of blown away. As you were speaking about World Book Night, I had this image of this sort of holiday that takes a little bit of Easter and a little bit of Christmas and puts it together, and people have to search out and find these books as gifts. I think that's fantastic. We should actually, promote that more, right? It's because, I love reading, and I think more people need to read. My wife is an English teacher. She's been a librarian, and it's very, very important. So we are getting kind of close to a break. One last thing I wanted to touch on is that now that the Dark Gifts series is ending, you're working on a new book series. Your new book, Sanctuary, is going to be out March 2019. Can you kind of give me a little tease as to what to expect next year?
Yes, so it's actually coming out a little bit later. We pushed it back to August because the sort of the response it's been getting as my publishers in the UK have been pushing it out to sort of potential publishers overseas is just like, wow, we love this book. So just to say that it's not March, it's looks set for August. Sanctuary is set in America.
Wow.
I jumped on for this. It has certain elements like the Dark Gifts books in that it is a contemporary America, but it is an alternate contemporary America. So in this world, witchcraft is a thing, but it's a mundane thing. It's an everyday sort of thing. So, if you've got a headache, you might go to the doctor, or you might go to the witch. If you've got relationship problems, you might go to a counselor or a therapist, or you might go to the witch. So it's just another sort of option that people have. It's another little store on Main Street that you can go to. So that's the world of witchcraft in this America, which otherwise looks pretty much as you'll all recognize. The instigator of the story. It's a little bit of a sort of a murder mystery. It's a crime thriller. It's taken all of that sort of pacey, plotty stuff that I enjoyed in Dark Gifts, and it's really ramped it up. The chapters are short, they move fast. It's kind of a police procedural. I mean, I've had such a blast writing it, because the inciting incident is it's set in a small town in Connecticut, that is Sanctuary. It's got its name from how efficiently it cleared out the witches back in old Salem times. And anyway, the folk in Sanctuary like to think they're a bit more enlightened these days. But when a sort of a popular star athlete kind of dies, a high school athlete dies at a end of year school party, dies in suspicious circumstances, and the girlfriend he's recently broken up with is the daughter of the local witch. So it spirals pretty rapidly. The folks of Sanctuary, sort of find that they're maybe not quite as okay with witches as they thought they were. So I had a huge amount of fun with it, and it's very fast. It's much more sort of explicitly thrillery and less sort of fantasy than the Dark Gift series. My hope is that it will sort of reach out to people who would not normally kind of grab a book if you start saying it's got magic in it. Hopefully they will reach for this one. But it has a lot of those themes. So I think sort of thematically it feels very much like a Vic James book, but I think it's sort of pushing beyond that into something that is hopefully going to be a lot more accessible to a general readership. You don't have to have your kind of I love fantasy hat on to pick up Sanctuary. So I'm ridiculously excited about it.
Wow.
I've had just the best time, and needless to say, the research has been quite amazing. Going to classes in witchcraft, it's so interesting, and it really feeds into a lot of relevant issues today as well, around things like, consent culture, do we believe victims, under what circumstances, what does it mean to say that you believe a victim? So it's very topical. But yep, you've got plots, you've got magic. So it's also, 100% a Vic James book.
Wow. Well, you've got me super excited now. I can't wait for August of 2019 now.
Marvelous.
Yes. Well, all right. Well, we do need to get to a break. If you wouldn't mind, if you could tell folks out there how to find you out there at social media and on the net, and how they can keep up with all the great books that you're writing.
Well, thank you so much. I'm quite chatty on Twitter, where my handle is at Dr. Victoria James, and I am on the same handle on Instagram, where I mainly get very enthusiastic about my own books and others. You can also find me on Facebook, where I'm Vic James Author.
Fantastic. Well, Vic, thank you so much for taking the time to come back on the show. We love having you on, and we can't wait to see more from you.
You know what? I would write books just to get invited back each year to talk to you.
Oh, man, that's so incredible. Thank you so much.